a good idea to maybe do a dry run. I know we have a budget meeting on the 19th. And I know that council asked staff to go away and come back with some novel solutions to try and reduce the taxation rate. So what I thought would be a good idea in this forum is to have an open discussion so that council can maybe steer staff to create a more refined second pass for next week, so that hopefully there will be not as much discussion, because we're going to have the discussion here. So what I was going to propose is to go through several initiatives that we think is worthwhile considering for the budget for next year. And just as a reminder, in terms of the growth that we've experienced compared to last year, we're looking at 0.94%, and that's $68,000. And when you then factor in the reduced provincial funding by 11,000, I think it is 11,000 reduced funding from I forget the fund, but we're talking not that much money added to the pot that we can play with. So we have two options. We either raise taxes to cover the additional efforts for the year, or the other alternative is that we introduce some form of user fees to then offset the increase in taxes. So just to give council a bit of a heads up, what staff have gone away and done is to propose a reduction in one FTE position in planning, and also to defer the 50% position in for the IT staff member. Now that will be, so we're going from an FTE in IT to outsourcing the services of an IT support company, so that Mark, who we have right now, is able to continue doing some higher end stuff and hopefully try to get some cost reduction initiatives in place. So we see that as, you're not adding headcount, but we still need the additional software service. In terms of trying to generate some additional revenue to offset the tax increase, I know we've discussed the burn permit. So staff was going to propose a reduced fee for the burn permit from $20 to $10. And then, so that then generates around $20,000 in additional revenue there. And then in terms of some additional fees for council to consider is, one is actually charging a fee for the commercial use of our municipally maintained launches and landings. So you may be aware that in some locations we have commercial contractors that will store their equipment, store the supplies, and basically use our launches and landings as a means of servicing the ratepayers out on the water. And I know, for example, in my previous experience at the Archipelago, we've been charging $500 per year for commercial operators to use the wharf at Point of Barrel, and that's been, that figure's been there since 2015. So one option is for council to adopt a similar fee for a commercial use of our municipally maintained facilities. Assume $500 again here for the season, and we figure there's probably 11 or 12 certainly contractors that we're aware that currently use our facilities, so that would generate about $6,000 in revenue. The other idea for generating some user fee revenue is actually they're joined. So council may or may not know that right now the trailers pay $20 a year as a fee. as a licensing fee. And bylaw goes out once a year to check the number of trailers. And one thought is to introduce a similar fee for boat slips of a certain size. So let's say for the liverboards. So any slip that is greater than 30 feet, charge a similar fee. And in this instance, we were thinking of increasing from $20 to $40 for the trailers and charging $40 for any slips that are greater than 30 feet. So that introducing those changes would add an additional almost $30,000 in revenue. And bylaw go out and check the trailer locations every year anyway, so it would be a case of bylaw going out and adding to their trip, checking the marinas for any slips that are over 30 feet. Now, what we can do is that to make sure that our ratepayers are not impacted, in the same manner that we can have a the words slipped my mind. In the same manner for the MAT tax, that if you're a ratepayer, you can claim that back. We could also do the same for these fees here for the slips. So if you're a resident and you have a boat that is greater than than 30 feet, then you can claim that cost back, because we don't want to penalize our ratepayers. But people who are outside, then $40 for the slip for the season. And other than planning staff, hopefully they will introduce an updated fees and charges for planning. And we've gone in conservatively right now at $10,000. We feel that there should be probably more than that. We want it to be conservative, so we don't stretch that for the time being. So overall, we've come up with a potential package that is a fairly significant cost savings compared to the first round. But I'll stop there because I know I've hit you with a lot of kind of ideas. So open it up for questions.
So if I understand correctly, your intent is we're talking strictly revenue here. So the expenses, the proposed cuts there will be discussed next week when we have our next budget meeting.
So this here is to try and get a feel for, because Ms. Bouthelette right now, she's preparing the package for the second draft. So if there's a clear no right now saying, nope, we want no fees, then Ms. Bouthelette will go away and not put any fees, so that we're not then spending time discussing it next week.
All right, we're going to let Council Jarvis lead off the conversation from a council side.
Wonderful, thank you. One, I'm sort of liking these ideas, but I will take the ramps, the launch ramp example there that you've given us. I would expect that if I were paying a fee for use of a launch ramp, then that money, the monies or whatever would be collected, some of that at least would be going to maintaining that launch ramp. And I presume we need to do that anyway, and that's a good way of doing that, right, Brad? It's okay.
Yes, sure.
And then the numbers you're giving us are don't include the cost of. I mean, nice to have something that's more of a net number, because there's going to be a cost for bylaw control in some of these situations, and maybe not so much in others. So it'd be nice to have sort of a better idea of what the cost to maintain. I mean, it's great to have these ideas for an income stream, but if it is the offset is how much it's going to cost to maintain, that could be problematic, I guess. Otherwise, I'm quite keen on that type of usage, because I know that I'm just looking, and the only ramp that I really consider is the public ramp at Honey Harbor, which is difficult from an access standpoint anyway. And I don't know what the status is on that. We should probably get updated someday on that. But anyway, would that be one of the ramps that would be subject to that? Because that's a ramp that would be used, I would expect.
Through the mayor, Yes, that is one of the ones we would look at. We were going to your other question quickly. We had money set aside for launch panels to get rid of the gravel, make a hard surface. That was deferred as we don't own all of the land there.
No, yeah.
And then we were directed that until that is resolved to hold off with the launch panels.
Yeah, so that's going to be a difficult one to sort of negotiate because, I mean, if we don't repair it and we charge for the use of it, but we aren't repairing it because we have other issues that sort of make it difficult. I mean, that's my only complication. And because I use Hunting Harbor, that's what I'm thinking of. But it's just something to be considered. Maybe that'll spur us on to getting that ownership issue sorted out.
Through the mayor, I don't think the ownership issue is something that's going to get resolved soon. But if we were to put in a paid parking there, I would agree that investing the money in some panels would be worth it. It would probably be around $20,000.
Thank you.
And if I may, going back to Councillor Jarvis's comment about the added resources, certainly we have Ms. Karina King, who's back now from maternity leave, to boost the Barlow department. In the first draft, we did include the addition of a supervisor. So we feel that these additional revenues should be able to be covered off by the existing staff. And once these fees are put in place, then it's done. So it's an initial paperwork of getting everything set up, and then really again, Barlow is out there checking for the trailer park grounds anyway. So it's a detour to go and check the marinas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bocheck, please.
Thank you. And I'm going to go back to your revenue generator from campgrounds being approximately $6,000, and perceivably the boat revenues would be around $30,000. I'm going to start with the marine part of it first, and the administration that would be involved in assessing the slips for the boats. Whether they have hydro water, whether the slips are going to have a boat in it that people aren't staying overnight. There are lots of 30-foot slips that have a 30-foot scarab on it, which has no sleeping ability, right? So I'm interested to see how all that folds out, and whether it would be a tax that would be imposed to the marina owner for the number of slips he has over that size, or would it be the boater that would actually be paying the rest? So there's a lot of questions to be asked. I think it's a fantastic idea. I just don't want it to become an administrative nightmare where we put out more money trying to administer it than we're getting back in from it. So looking forward to that one.
But that begs the question, if I may, in the case of the trailers, are we billing the individual trailers, or are we billing the campground?
I believe we're billing the campground. Yeah.
So that, in effect, answers part of your question, I think. That was the model.
I imagine this is just very preliminary right now, and the more formulated plan to come to a budget time, or
microphone.
Mr. Cooper, I was saying that I'm just wondering if we're going to include this in the budget and then work out the administration of how we're going to do it after. And that was the question.
So if council likes the idea of the policy, then we will go ahead and implement it. Yeah, we'll get it figured out. It's yeah.
Councillor Cooper, please.
Well, I think part of my question was answered, but in terms of the marina slips and 30-foot boats, the concept is that they're using from time to time certain of our services, so to speak. So that's why we would have a justification for a liveaboard boat in a marina. So we might have, Brian can probably tell us, but we might have 200 or 300 liveaboard boats in Hunting Harbor area. Is that about right, Brian? It's just a guess, but anyway. So that's, could be fairly significant. I'm wondering from an administrative perspective, we should think about it in advance because it could, as Brian has pointed out, be a nightmare. So one of the ways to avoid that is maybe through the marina operators. It's a bit like a hotel tax, and you know, if you go into hotels in many cities, you pay an extra fee, so to speak, and to stay in that hotel. It would be a similar situation here. They collect it. Maybe we share a little bit of the fee with the operator for collecting the money. And that might be one way of doing it. I don't know. It's worth considering. So that was one comment. As far as the launch ramps are concerned, I think we have an opportunity where there's a launch ramp that can be collected, where money can be collected and actually managed. So two things: collecting money, but also managing the service. And you know, I think of the one that was mentioned in Honey Harbor. There is a marina right next door that actually, you know, has docks right beside the launch ramp, and maybe we once again share with that operator to collect the fleet fee for launching. So if it costs $30 to launch, maybe the operator gets $10 and we get $20, something like that. So just some things for you and your team. I'm sure that you've thought of this, Greg, but just as a suggestion. Versus there will be other other launch ramps. I don't know how we'd collect anything because there will be nobody there to collect it. And do we want to hire somebody to be there on the off chance that somebody will be using the launch ramp? Unless it's a very busy launch ramp, let's say at Port Severn on a bass boat weekend, I can understand that. But there may be lots of times when many of these launch ramps are just, you know, accessed, and people might even work around the hours of our employee if we had a limited amount of employment. So a few things to think about. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Sokash, you wanted to respond.
Thank you, Your Worship. What we're looking at for most, if not all, the locations is an automated system with a gate. They do sell them. You pay at the location, or if you have a card, there's a way to use that as well. Those are the systems we've looked into preliminarily. Thank you.
All right. But if I understood it correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the proposal you had initially mentioned was for the commercial operators. So it's like they would have a pass card, so to speak, that they'd hang in their windshield or wherever they put it, so we would know that they paid an annual fee versus per use fee. Okay. Councillor Hazelton, please.
Me already. That's lovely. So I think the ideas are directional, and I like them. I want to share with you again. I have to chuckle. Mr. Councillor Cooper keeps talking about history and how important it is. So I'm going to share a little tidbit of history. We had some very involved people in the 90s who did some research, and I'm going to quote their numbers, although I can't verify them because I don't know where they exactly got them, but they were certainly leading people in the community. And they did a study of the trailer parks, and they communicated to us, and probably to council at that point in time, that when you take the trailer and you look at the services that we provide, being waste, fire and EMS, and police, that the actual cost of that trailer to us as a township is about $1,100 a year. And so when we start thinking about attaching a cost associated with a trailer, in most cases, trailers are not assessed by impact. So there is no assessment. It's just purely they're getting a free ride. So just to give some quantities here, I started digging into this back in 2021. And at the time, there were 677 trailers and trailer parks in our township. Of those, 323 were not assessed, which means 323 were ideal candidates for the full fee, and impacted an assessment on the rest of them, apparently. Whether or not we end up getting enough taxes to cover our costs of those services, I doubt it. But I think that we need to be in a completely different order of magnitude than 20 or 30 or 50 or 40 or whatever that number is. When we look, I think what we heard in all the community meetings when we were talking about waste was everybody in the meeting was saying, we need to recoup our costs from these other live aboard, living in things, because they're consuming the same thing. If you take a cottager in Honey Harbor and you take a trailer park user, trailer park owner, sorry, trailer renter or whatever, and you look at what they are providing in the way of, or consuming in the way of services, it's the same thing. And so I think we want to definitely consider this idea, but I think the number needs to be way higher than what it is we're talking. Like certainly, you know, 500 to $1,000 is probably a more reasonable number to cover our costs, unless we can demonstrate that our costs are a lot less. So I would certainly encourage that. And then from a live aboard boat perspective, once again, we know the marinas that have live aboard boats. We know the marinas that choose to not have live aboard boats. And generally speaking, I would back to our analogy of a duck. If it looks like a duck and it smells like a duck, it's a duck. If it's a live aboard boat and it's got living accommodation, it's a candidate for having a fee applied to it. And it's pretty easy with all of the aerial mapping and Google mapping and everything else we have these days, so that we could very easily and quickly see the boats that are being moored and say, okay, we can just count all these boats from that picture. Boom, there's 135 live aboard boats at that marina, and that marina operator is now responsible for collecting fees for all of those live aboard boats, which, by the way, consume fire and EMS, police, and waste. So I love the idea. I think the ideas that I've heard on the launch side of things are helpful. I think Brad's idea about having a remote accessible or some sort of keypad or visa pad or whatever opening, that could work very well. But yeah, I think these are excellent strategies, and I can assure you that the majority of our permanent and seasonal residents would welcome these kinds of strategies. So thank you.
If I may, I just want to make one comment. I don't think you mentioned roads, and yet roads are one of the biggest expenses municipalities face. Certainly, it's the highest single item at the district budget, and we're paying half our taxes go to district. And whether you have a cottage or you have a boat, you're going to drive to it.
Yes.
And so they are consumers of our roads, which I think, now waste varies because some sites have commercial waste services, other marinas or trailer parks have district services. So that one varies. But, you know, they're driving those roads every weekend or whatever the frequency is.
Yeah, and everybody has fire and EMS,
Yep.
and the police tell us that their frequency of their services is much higher being delivered to trailer parks than it is to resident properties on roads and water access properties. So it might be useful to get the police to give us some stats on what the percentages of their services delivered to trailer parks is compared to other properties as we go about trying to pin down the right number.
Thank you. Councillor Predko.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship, just two areas of comments. One to the CAO. So we've got the MAT tax and other tax and user fee refunds for residents. And I guess this is another area where I'm wondering how the administration of this exemption would really take place. And is this, and I know it's important to the residents to be able to get refunds for these types of fees, but is it a situation where you think that there will be very few people looking for a refund and the administration of that will be very manual?
So really, in the same manner that we collect the fees for the trailer park, you know, a lot of the work would be handled by the marina owner as well as the trailer park owner. So the onus would be on the person who owns the boat or who has the trailer to go to the owner and say, well, I live here, therefore I'd like my, you know, my $40, $50, $60 back. And that then can come back to us as a list from, from the owner of the business that we can then do a quick cross check.
So I can't speak to short-term rental policy, but I don't know that there's a central, like a person who always has that information. So it would be the person, I think, that is originally paying that would be the one that knows whether or not they live in the township. And that might be for our other user fees too. So just putting it out there, I just want to be cognizant that we may still have an administrative burden that would be on the township staff. And the other area that I want, and I think all of the suggestions you guys are coming up with are fantastic, and I think they're working in the right direction. I always worry a little bit about approving something or putting something in the budget that we haven't approved in principle, because we always have a downside risk of council second guessing or re-questioning the details versus so I don't know if there's any way to put a mitigating number into the budget to help not include all of the upside benefits you're seeing, because some of it, we're not going to wholeheartedly endorse at the end of the day. And the two other suggestions I had for you, and maybe you could have considered them and rejected them, or maybe they're just things that you could put on the list for the future. There was a resolution back in April for a report on naming rights and selling rights for signage and other facility names in the municipality. I'm not sure if anything has come forward on that, but potentially there's some small number of dollars that could be realized by that type of a policy. And the second, we had also, I think, had a tour of the cemetery and heard that there may be other opportunities in the future for changing the approach towards the cemetery and funeral. And now that we have solemnization of marriage, maybe we can do something. So anyway, just some other suggestions to add to the list to make more work.
Yeah, no, those are good points, Councillor Predko. I guess what we've put for these numbers is because we have a good idea, in terms of this is what we can start the year with. We've got the numbers. If council agrees on the dollar amounts per slip, there's a bit of extra effort on the staffing side to get it set up and maybe to administer it, but it's not going to add any headcount, if you like. So it's going to be absorbed within the current staffing levels that we have. In terms of some other items like the marriage licenses, it's a bit more grey in terms of how many we're going to sell, which is why we're going to, we'll leave that until the first year, and then we have an idea to include it. And the same with the naming rights. I think that's something that we can easily include in a fees and charges bylaw. But we don't know how that's going to know how we're going to pitch it, how we're going to sell it, and so we figured we'd start with some harder numbers and harder ideas. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up because Councillor Predko took one of my points, but I'm going to follow up on it if I may, and that is this giving whatever little taxes we have, whether it's a mat tax or a trailer or boat tax, back to residents. To me, you're creating what is potentially an administrative nightmare, and I'm thinking, do we take somebody who owns 2 pieces of property and give them a discount on their second property? So if they own a property and a boat, why should they? To me, why should they get a discount on their boat if they're not going to get a discount on their second property? I mean, I own 2 properties. I'm happy to take a discount on the second one, please. But I mean, I'm just wondering, like, I don't understand. Plus, I'm not that sure how many. I mean, outside of Councillor Bochek, perhaps, who necessarily have keep a boat at a slip and have a cottage, I'm not sure it's worth it to say to folks, we're going to give you a discount on part of your property in our township because you have other property in the township.
would certainly be, from an administrative point of view, it would certainly be easier if it was just a flat.
Yeah.
That's it, and then forget. I guess what we try to do is walk that fine line, right? Because when we introduced the MAT tax the first time around, there's a huge concern that it was going to impact our ratepayers. That's why we came back this year to say, if you're a resident, you don't pay the MAT tax. And so we extended that philosophy to these additional fees. But if council is comfortable saying, you know what, it's not worth the administrative headache, everyone pays the fee, no matter whether you're a resident or not, then we're good with that too.
I'm a little bit surprised, if I can follow up on, I personally had not heard from any resident saying that they didn't think that they should pay a MAT tax. What I heard from residents is if they own property here, they didn't think they should be collecting it because they were the ones I heard the complaints from. It was the residents who are currently renting out their cottage stay for so many weeks a year, and they didn't want to have that extra responsibility, and which is a very different thing than having a resident who has a cottage here who then also decides to rent, call it an Airbnb for a weekend because they have too many guests. Anyway, Councilor Graziano, did you want to join the first round before I let Bocek and Cooper start the second round?
You're welcome to start the second.
Okay, Councilor Bocek.
I wanted to expand a little bit on Councillor Cooper's idea, and it's got to do with the launch ramps. And I can see this being an administrative nightmare, and I think there's a workaround. If we were to take the ramp in Honey Harbor as an example, it's right beside Staun's Marina. If you were to say approach him and say, it's your ramp, count the number of boats you launched this year. And then next year we say, okay, you launched 3,000 boats at $30 a boat. 50% of that is X number of dollars. We're going to lease you that launch ramp for that number of dollars, and you take the revenues and run. Administration gone. He takes care of all the administration. We simply charge him a lease. And I think we should look at that formula maybe at some of our other assets and letting other people administer them and just collect a lease off it. So just food for thought.
I think that's a great work plan item for Mr. Sokash for 2024. Yeah, no, it's a great idea. It's not in the budget this year because we don't know, we have to enter into agreements and so on and so forth. But yeah, no, I think it's great to partner with with people who can manage the assets for us, 100%.
Councilor Cooper.
Thank you. I'll just be very brief. I'm interested that Councillor Bocek picked up on what I was talking about. Is exactly what I was talking about, that we need to work together with our community business managers and so on. That it's an ideal example is the one in Honey Harbor because there's a marina right there, right at the launch ramp. And why would we want to try and manage that when you have the resources there? It's a bit like the bins that are at the marinas. The staff at the marinas look after them, so it's the unmanaged bins we have the trouble with. So I think the same applies to launch ramps. I guess we also though need to remember that there are quite a number of launch ramps that are not going to be managed in that way because they're not adjacent to a marina, and that becomes another question as to the real need for them in some cases and the cost of them and so forth. So anyway, I think we need to certainly look for ways to generate revenue. As far as if you have more than one household, home, whatever, and I think it's treated the same way as anything else. You pay taxes on it, you get services from the township, you pay for it. So I don't know that we, Mr. Mayor, that we'd just because you happen to have two places, that you should necessarily get a break, or at least I don't see the reason for that. It still require those residences, in a sense, still require services from our township, equipment and so forth, and employees. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you. Just CAO Mariotti, could you just reconfirm? I think I heard you say that you're expecting about 6K from trailers.
Yeah, so I can run through those numbers again, Councillor Hazelton. So for the trailers, an additional $20, which would bring it to $40, and bylaw counted 666 units last season, so that would be an additional 13,000 and change. And for the seasonal slip license for slips that are greater than 30, we estimate around about 400 slips to be confirmed by bylaw. And again, $40 a slip is an extra $16,000.
Okay, so the 30K that you'd thrown out there was a sum of everything, right?
Yeah, those
Okay.
two.
So, do you want to hold on to those small numbers, or do you want to consider much larger numbers? Because based on what the mayor just offered in a minute ago, if you take in waste, fire and EMS, police, and roads, like the costs that these trailers and liveaboard boats are on our community, and the residents are paying the fare for all of these guys, and that came out clear in the waste discussion. I don't think we should be thinking about small numbers of another plus 20 or 40 for liveaboard boats. I think we should be starting at 100, 200, 300, and going up from there. I mean, the costs are astronomical, and their contribution is nothing, almost nothing. So we need to fix that problem, and we heard loud and clear there's an appetite for these things to be fixed. Thank you.
If I could follow up on that, I'm just wondering whether we've had chats with, say, Tay, Midland, Penetang, Tiny, just to name a few people nearby that have larger marinas that serve the yacht community, and how they tax those marinas and/or yacht slips. I'd be curious if there's, if we look into some, I'll call it comparison points. And the reason I say that is, to what degree are they taxing those commercial operations at a higher rate than we may be taxing at this point, versus are they charged, or is any other municipality charging by the slip, or are we we'll call it a leader with this idea? I would be very interested to know some of that information, because we're certainly not the only community where there's a significant population of people who use either trailers or yachts for their accommodation. And I'm sure they're facing the same challenges, and perhaps there's some precedent. Mike?
We currently have that. So I have to register my boat with the municipality. I get a sticker that says 2024. It goes on my boat window, and I pay $250 annually to have that privilege at my second home, not here in this township. So, and if you look anywhere in the United States, you will see a sticker with usually an outline of the state with the 24, and that's what you pay for, and there's a registered number on the bottom of it. So this is not new, and there's all kinds of areas where you can go to and look at that. And not only that, if I may, so in our home in Florida, we had what they call a double wide trailer. In other words, a manufactured home where two of them are put together, and annually I had to go to the municipal office and pay for a tag for each of the sides. And it was $190 per side. So what Councillor Hazelton's saying here about facts and figures, I think if we did our research, we might find out that we're missing a big revenue stream. Huge.
Gratiana.
If I could add, because we're in Cal, you're about to find out, Greg, being a boat owner, that for your slip and your in and your out and your winterization, everything else, it's in excess of $10,000 a year. So to add an extra $100 or $200 to a boater is not a big deal if you show them what you're giving them for their money.
It's a lot less than HST.
Oh, yeah.
I think Greg's bill needs to be at least 500.
It hasn't worked in the past. Councilor Graziano.
Thank you, through your worship. I wonder whether this is a good opportunity for me to chime in on my matter, given that essentially what I'm proposing is intended to address some of the concerns that Councillor Bocek and Councillor Hazelton had addressed, which is we don't know what we don't know. And I think that there's a lot more revenue here that we can realize through some additional research. And I'd hate to burden that research back on to our staff and continue this discussion when we can engage a third party to do that, and then present back to us what they perceive to be our strongest revenue points, what are underutilized assets, and essentially what we can do to really maximize our revenue realization. Right now, what's been proposed is a total sum of $66,000 on a municipality that, from our perspective, I'm not calculating the collection that we do on behalf of the District of Muskoka, but at $11 million worth of total taxation a year, it's only 6% of of what our operating budget. And I think that we have a lot more potential to realize stronger revenue streams through the assistance of a third party, going to market, doing thorough research, deep research, and coming back and presenting to council, with a very thorough understanding of where we're missing the mark and what we can be doing and what we can be leveraging to our advantage. So, shameless plug, but there we are.
Shameless or not, I would like to add to that. I don't think we're setting out to tax people for tax sake. I think what we're looking at in many of these things is having people pay their fair share who currently aren't paying their fair share. And I'll use an example, and maybe my phone will blow up on this one, but when contractors are using our parking areas and our ramps and not paying anything, they're not paying their fair share because they're making a lot of money utilizing our space. And I think, that's just but one example. And as Councillor Hazelton has made very clear, when we have a lot of people who have, I'm going to call it their seasonal home here, but the seasonal home happens to be a trailer or a yacht, they're still using many of our resources, including, well, he's laid them all out, or most of them out, but, we're just asking them to pay their fair share. We're not trying to penalize these folks in any way. And I think for our property owners who've been paying their fair share or more for ever, that it's only fair that everybody else who uses the area also makes a contribution to our new fire trucks or the police services that we get, or the roads we drive on. It's one of the reasons why, one of the other things that we haven't discussed here, but the planning fees. I really think that, I really hope that when we look at planning fees, that there is an element of scalability in there. And I'm not sure exactly how to do it and what the rules will or won't allow, but we know that some files are 2-day files and some files are 2-week files, or more. And that, to some degree, I think, things like that, there should be some scalabilities. Somebody adding a 300 square foot sleeping cabin is different than somebody building a 3,000 square foot home. Anyway, I think I personally believe that that's another area where we have opportunity to have people paying their fair share. Councillor Bocek.
I'm just wondering if one of the committees that we've struck, or working groups that we've struck, if it wouldn't be worth our while to invite Maple Leaf Marinas and some of the campground owners and some of the private marina owners together and have a conversation about this and get some input. I don't think it'll be frowned upon by them because it's a pass-through cost by them. So I think to have a little bit of insight from some of the major players in that industry might be helpful for our staff to formulate something in the future.
It would be interesting because, and we'll use the example you mentioned, name them by name, Maple Leaf Marinas. They have marinas in numerous municipalities.
Yes.
they would be able to compare for us what they do or don't do in other municipalities.
Mhm.
And they might tell us they don't do any of this everywhere else, or they might say, well, actually, in these 3 municipalities, we have this, this, and that. So it might be very useful to get their input.
Yeah, I think they'd be more than willing to come in and sit, as a previous marina owner operator, you know, if this was in front of me, I would certainly like to have a little bit of input or direction on it. And it can be beneficial to everybody. You know, just because you're asking for money doesn't mean there's not benefits attached to it.
Councillor Hazelton.
So I would like to make an observation and maybe make a suggestion. So we began this discussion and we heard staff come to us with ideas of plus 20 and 30 or 40 or whatever. And then we heard from Councillor Bochek that no, the numbers are more like 250 or 200 or whatever. And this is no criticism of anybody, but what I'm really wanting to transition to is Councillor Graziano has a resolution coming up, which is really, let's bring some expertise from the outside to the table and help us, guide us to make some good decisions. And with a third party recommending things that we do, it'll keep Brian's phone from blowing up and other things like that. And I think that the end state is we will get to a more comprehensive understanding of where revenue opportunities could exist in the township. And I think we're picking off 2 or 3, but I think there's probably a lot more. And again, I'm not trying to jump agenda items, but I think what Councillor Graziano has introduced here will take us there. And maybe we should pause this discussion and shift to that resolution, or sorry, that agenda item, and see if it gets us where we feel we need to go in the way of a forward direction.
Well, before we do that, I'll ask if anybody else wants to add to the current discussion, or are you ready to switch straight over to Councillor Graziano, and then we'll come back to Councillor Hazelton's item, because he already volunteered us to skip. Okay, seeing nothing, I say let's go to Councillor Graziano, let him introduce his topic, because I think it is directly related.
Thank you, and I'll read the report. With inflationary pressures and high interest rates forecasted to be higher for longer, and with each successive budget seeking an increase in funds to augment township obligations through provincial and federal downloading, increasing our revenue while keeping increases in taxes to a minimum may be a prudent policy practice. Having retained consultants in the past who sought to find cost-cutting measures and efficiencies, Council has an opportunity for 2024 to analyze ways in which to increase our revenues by engaging a consulting partner. This partner shall conduct market research on how other municipalities of a similar size and nature and a similar nuanced requirements have increased their revenues while presenting their findings, which did I hear it? Okay. Which shall also include revenue suggestions that will maximize the township's ROI. Our townships currently may have underutilized assets which could be revenue generating, thereby decreasing the burden on to our taxpayers. For 24-25, let's ensure that council and staff have a sound understanding of what our fullest potentials can return by way of unrealized revenues. The resolution proceeds to say that staff go to market and identify a consulting partner or partners who can offer such service. That they that staff at their discretion have the opportunity to engage a consulting partner as either a sole source contract or release an RFP, and that staff, to the best of their abilities, attempt to commensurate the consulting engagement by sometime in February and or around the return of council in February, with perhaps a report back on which direction they've gone, whether it's RFP or through sole source. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bochek.
Oh, thank you. And I endorse a form of this, but I don't want to see it go to the level that it went to in 2012. I think Councillor Cooper and I were recipients of the IMG papers that were given to us, and it didn't focus it basically took everything within the township and analyzed it. And I think we could have a far less report than the ING report and just focus on revenue generating. And I think it'd be of great value because we can all think of different ways of doing things and generating revenue, but we don't think it through. We just usually think it how it's going to happen. We don't look at the repercussions of it. And these studies tend to do that. So I'm totally in favor of endorsing this and certainly finding out what the cost of it would be. Thank you.
I think, Councillor Bocek, your point is well taken in that this should be focused on, I'll call it new revenue sources, not comparing, for instance, tax rates here versus tax rates elsewhere. But we're talking about revenue sources that are not coming from property taxes. We're talking about other than property taxes. Because obviously we can just increase property taxes by another 10, 20%, and we don't need to study, but that's not our intention. I think our intention, no, I think our intention is to have people who aren't paying their fair share to pay their fair share, you know, and
this could be very interesting too, because I'm sure if we pull this off, we're going to get a call from a member that all the other members. So are you? How's that?
Yep.
Because this is really innovative. This is something that.
Microphone.
oh, you're also
We should have done this years ago, perhaps.
well, you know, and I'll use one example is that I've heard, for instance, Huntsville introduced a MAT tax, and they have been pleasantly surprised at how well that has worked on their budget. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, no, I like all the ideas that are put on the floor. The idea of bringing somebody in from outside, to me, is not particularly appealing right off the bat. My experience with consultants is either you pay them and they give you what you were looking for anyway, and just the way you want it, which is not what you want to see. You want a consultant that can look at things from a different angle, and I'm sure there are those out there as well. But I think we should be leaving it up to staff to determine whether that type of an approach is necessary, and they can take the next step from there and bring it to us as an idea for us to consider at that time. Small steps are a good way to start off with these things, and I think that's what we're looking at right now. And I have confidence in staff to be able to determine whether there are other ways to look at this, and therefore bringing in a consultant is a good idea or not.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
I guess I'd like to just sort of say that I guess there are consultants and then there are consultants, and what they do and what they provide. Councillor Bocek was referring to consultants we brought in the past who analyzed the operation of our township, core services review, that kind of thing. Started with KPMG and then Blackline, etc. This is a different animal, and in fact, it's a very different consultant, because it's really what we're talking about here is we almost need somebody that's has a pretty good head around marketing. What are the opportunities, marketing opportunities for us, as opposed to sort of bottom line services driven, grinded out sort of analysis. That's not really what we're talking about here at all. So I would very much support having somebody come in with that kind of background that can help us market ourselves, frankly, in a much more effective way. And with all due respect, this is not a comment about staff, but that expertise is not particularly in-house. That's why I suggest what I suggest. So I'm all on board with the suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's definitely a positive response from council. I suppose we need a motion. I don't have one in front of me. Or do I? And oh, sorry, if I go deeper down, there we go. I apologize. I do have one in front of me, and I'm going to read it, and then we'll see whether anybody wants any edits before I call the vote. And I have moved by Councillor Graziano, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that staff go to market and identify a consulting partner or partners who can offer such a service, and that council provides staff at the discretion the opportunity to engage a consulting partner as a sole source contract or to release an RFP, and that staff, to the best of their abilities, attempt to commence the consulting engagement by the return of council in February of 2024, and or return back with an update on the status of the consulting partnership. The only thing I'm concerned about this is we haven't said what these people are about to do. It's in the report. Okay, but we should have it in the motion somehow.
If I may,
You may.
so Councillor Graziano shared a staff report from 7, which is the economic development strategy, which I think captures kind of what we want to do here, Councillor Graziano, in terms of doing an overall revenue generating review, just for council's idea of cost. So the cost for the consultants for 7 is $65,000. And I'm mentioning this because we really need it to then put it into the budget, right? So if council wants to go ahead, then I suggest that we put that kind of a budgetary amount in there.
Thank you. And to CAO Mariotti's comments, that's correct. However, in Severn's case, it was a lot broader than just having a laser focus on revenue generating. They looked at market data, they looked at industry, they looked at a lot of different aspects of their municipality and the demographics. So it was a lot broader than perhaps what we intended to be. But again, I'll defer to our CAO on what he would tentatively need to be set aside in budget for him to start shopping this out. You know, to your point, though, I think that it was prudent that we do add the scope within the resolution so staff knows what to engage. And I think based on all of our comments today, we're all in agreement, or some of us are in agreement rather, that that this has to be focused on just strictly, you know, kind of how to market ourselves and how to generate revenue with the assets that we have and what we have that are underutilized that could be generating revenue, as well as what other municipalities are doing as a best practice to generate revenue. Thank you.
Councillor Predko.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Just on that, the wording of the resolution, I think the last sentence has the proposal and either sole source or RFP presented back to council. I'm not sure if we need to have an opportunity for staff to have more, they may have questions of council before presenting a final RFP or a proposal. So I'm not sure if that final sentence is too fait accompli, or if we need to have something that's a little more flexible in terms of what is given to council, or what the report that comes back from staff to council is.
Well, our clerk is busy writing on the piece of paper, but I think if I understand you correctly, you're saying let's give staff a bit of flexibility, come back with a recommendation of how best to look into this? Is that
yeah? So I guess if it's currently drafted, that we want them to come back with an RFP or a proposal. I think they may want to ask us about feasibility or some other scope questions. So it may be something they're bringing us something back that's not as final as what the draft currently is worded for.
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, mine's sort of a cart and horse question. And I may have missed some of Councillor Graziano's last comments. So if I'm what I'm asking or checking on has been covered, correct me. But we're looking at a cost to bring somebody in. We haven't yet established or confirmed that we have any new income stream from any of these other items we've been discussing. So are we looking at spending money before we actually bring any money in, or are we going to start bringing some money in and then look at the possibility of bringing in a consultant at a cost? I mean, we keep adding things to our budget, not taking things out of our budget. And I'd rather see a way of us generating some revenue as opposed to spending it. And if we have some good ideas here already on the table that we can utilize, we should be utilizing them as opposed to sitting aside waiting for a consultant and then going from there. I think the idea is to have something that affects our budget positively this year or for 2024. And I think the ideas that were put on the table a moment ago are worthwhile looking into. I have no problem with the consultant, but I think we need to have the revenue in place or something in place to pay for it, because
I
it's on the budget.
I think if I may,
Yep.
that nobody said no to the suggestions that staff have
Okay,
already made.
I wasn't sure whether they
And
were,
so I
one
think,
was
you know,
exclusionary of the other. Thank you.
Councillor Hazelton, followed by Councillor Bochuk.
Yeah, just to address Councillor Jarvis's concerns about funding. If we were to have this consulting firm come back and recommend that we do what we just talked about, and bring us background information to justify it, we're probably looking at $75,000 for liveaboard boats, and probably another, I don't know, $75,000 to $100,000 for trailers in revenue streams. That's just kind of two tiny items that would be part of this overall scope. So I see this as a huge revenue opportunity. But I think in order for us as council and staff ultimately to make these kinds of changes, we really need to have the this third-party expertise brought to the table to help us with formulating not only a couple of these decisions, but several of them. So a couple I think are no-brainers, and those are things that we can probably move forward with quickly. But we do need the bigger picture, and I think that'll be self-funding from that standpoint.
Thank you. Councillor Bochuk, followed by Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, and through you, the report would also offer, because it's going to be focused on asset and revenue generating from assets, and you take something like the Mactier Arena, which may lose us $600,000 a year currently. I don't know what it loses, but say it does lose us that much, 108,000. 180,000, whatever, it loses us every year. And if this report says, hey, you know what, consider doing this and this with the sell the arena and have a private operator do it, who knows? We have been bumbling around this for the 10 years I've been here on all of our assets and never gotten anywhere. And the first time I've ever heard of anything that is conclusive and is going to put us in the right direction is this resolution on this white page, where we actually get somebody to come in and tell, because we don't know what we're doing, tell us what we should be doing. I think it's vital.
But I don't think it should be exclusively assets generating the revenue. And for instance, the examples of trailers and yachts, we don't own those.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So I think it's assets and
assets and yeah.
Councillor Cooper, please.
Can't hear you. Turn your mic on.
Stephen, you can say the same thing.
The kettle black.
That's right. I'll throw mud if I can. Anyway, I just wanted to say that both comments I just heard were bang on. I think we have to be fairly expansive in this. We have been bumbling, Brian. You're absolutely right, for a long time, and really never got anywhere. And enough of that already. Let's do something else. And let's be honest. We aren't particularly skilled at understanding how we can market ourselves, how we can generate extra revenues. That's a very specific things, particularly the marketing aspect of it, how we tell our story out there. So I would encourage this very much so. And you know, in terms of the concern about paying for it, Councillor Jarvis, I think that, you know, we've got a whole fiscal year ahead of us, and we've got an opportunity in the second half of the year maybe to have generated some of this money to pay not only for the consultant, but actually start filling our coffers. And I know that your ratepayers and mine would be thrilled to actually see the taxes flatline. That would be amazing and a good thing to do. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I now have in front of me a 7-paragraph motion that I'm going to read with a couple of blanks that people are going to yell out numbers at me or something. So if you're ready. 1, whereas the Township of Georgian Bay is facing increased costs through inflation and downloading by the federal and provincial governments, and whereas the Township of Georgian Bay has underutilized assets and other revenue sources, I've added that little bit in, And whereas the Township of Georgian Bay is seeking revenue generating options, thereby decreasing the burden on ratepayers, and therefore be it resolved that staff go to market, identify a consulting partner who can offer such a service, and that council provides staff at their discretion the opportunity of engaging a consulting partner as a sole source contract or to release an RFP, and that staff, to the best of their abilities, attempt to commence the consulting engagement by the return of council in February 2024, and or return back with an update on the status of the consulting partnership, and that staff be directed to include up to a maximum of X, 25,000, 50,000, in the draft 2024 operating budget for this purpose.
Sorry, if I may,
Yes, you
for
may.
Julie's benefit, we can either be directed to include it in the draft 2024 operating budget or be authorized to spend up to a maximum of from wherever you want us
Reserves or something.
to take it from.
So I'm throwing out at you, what amount should we allow at least initially as a up to, and operating or reserves? Or if Ms.
Well-
Bouquet has any other suggestions, or CAO Mariotti.
I guess for budgetary purposes, we could put in a placeholder.
Yeah.
And then we can come back with, obviously, with a costing from one or two individuals. So I would go with, I know 7 was 65, and if we're looking at a bit more of a focused approach, let's say 40.
And do we want to identify where it comes from? Or just in the operating budget, or just in the budget?
Okay. I think just in the operating, so scratch that part.
Okay. All right. So the last paragraph now reads that staff be directed to include $40,000 in the draft 2024 budget. Any comments? All those in, just by the wire.
You just reiterate that this would be coming to council in February, or was that in the resolution? I thought you said there's something about coming.
That staff, to the best of their abilities, attempt to commence the consulting engagement by the return of council in February, or with an update on the status.
Great, thank you.
So at the very least, we're going to get some idea what's going on by then. They may have the whole report done and have the stuff for us. Okay, maybe not. All those in favor? And that is carried, if I can have a space for it. Okay, that makes sense? I'm going to suggest, if I may, that we're now done items 7A and 8A. No, we're not even close. CEO Mariotti.
The immediate aspect of this is that we're trying to prepare a budget for next week.
Yes.
And so staff have suggested, $40 for a slip, an additional $20 to make it $40 for a trailer license fee. I've heard council having a conversation that maybe we should build in a little bit more. So staff really needs some kind of council direction as to what you think is a reasonable number for us to plug into the budget and give you a percentage tax rate at the end of the day. Because now we've got the $40,000 that we're spending now again. So
should I do my auctioneer invitation? Do I hear 40, 40, 40? Do anybody 40, 45, 45, 45? Do I hear 50, 50? Speak up, council.
I think we need a starting point here. And to be honest with you, I'm hoping that the report that we receive back will give us some indication on where we should be with these fees. That's the whole purpose of getting a report on this. So I don't think it would be unreasonable. So you have to understand where they are now. So a guy and his wife have a trailer over at Willow Lanes, and they're paying what, $20? $20 now.
Which they may not even realize because it's the owner of the property that's collecting it.
Yeah. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't at least double or triple that to begin with. And then after we get some sort of assessment from this report, we can understand where we need to be with it. But to remain where we are now, I think is ridiculous. So I'm going to shoot out there 60 and 120, 60 for a trailer, 120 for a boat. That gives us a starting place, maybe fund this report. And then this time next year, we do what needs to get done.
May I ask why you've doubled it for the boat versus the trailer?
Well, yeah, that's just personal experience. I've been in a marina. I've had boat fires. I've had major catastrophes. I've seen what this township and Chief Van Damme has had to do at the marina. And I know how much different it is to be in a marina than be in a trailer park when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Any other comments from councillors? Because at this point, Councillor Cooper, please.
I concur with the analysis of Councillor Bochek. I mean, you have to sort of think about a marina and a boat is a second home. It's not an initial home, whereas a trailer might be, or often is, I would think, or can be. So I just think it's a slightly different, not slightly, somewhat different demographic, and I think we can charge accordingly. And there's the associated, just look at the value of a 35 or 40 foot boat and what it would cost to have a toy like that, so to speak. And and just ask our CAO. There we go. Anyway, that's my suggestion. I think we could probably hit it at a, even at 100 and 200 or something. Anyway.
I think another very significant difference is most boats have a lot of gas in them. Most trailers do not.
Right.
They have propane. Your microphone's not on, sorry.
One of our major costs at a marina would be sewage from these boats, where a campground has a septic system that collects it all and does it all. Boats, they don't have a septic system. Well, one place does. We'll talk about that later. It has to be taken off the boat and has to be transported to our lagoons or to our sewage treatment plant here, and there's major costs involved in that as well too.
All right. So your proposal is upping travel trailer cost $60 a year and yachts at $120 a year. Oh, sorry. Okay, not travel trailers, mobile homes or mobile what? There's so many names that those units can have. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot different.
Well, and of course, let's not forget that many of these units are already impact assessed that have foundations and things like that. So they wouldn't be covered by this because they have an assessment attached to them.
I know across the street here that's the case, but I think all the rest of them are the opposite.
I don't know what wording, but anyway, we know what, because we've collecting $20 on these units now. So whatever the wording we have, you're suggesting that rate get bumped to 60, and that for yachts over 30 feet in length on 120, and Council Hazelton is going to either agree or disagree. Council Hazelton, with your microphone on.
Talk.
I know, but you were about to.
CAO Mariotti. Are you just looking for numbers to put in the budget? We're not looking for us to communicate these numbers to trailer parks or marinas at this point in time.
Not at this point in time, but if the budget gets approved next week with these assumptions,
Yes.
we would be going out next year and reaching out to the various business owners.
Okay, I understand that. What I'm trying to figure out here is a timing thing. So we have a resolution that is saying we'll get somebody else to come in and guide us on how to go with external advice. Those numbers that we're kind of just justifying here as starting point, I thought were just, let's put some numbers in the budget to start the budget process. But if this consulting firm comes back and says, no, boats should be 250 is what Brian is paying right now, and trailers should be 190. If the report comes back in February or March, we should be in a position where
Sorry.
We
It'll
may
be
be
middle of the
able
year.
to, we may be able to ask the consulting firm to carve out that one element initially as part of their overall thing and come back to us so that we can implement this for the beginning of the season. And the beginning of the season is what, April, May? So, you know, we have a little bit of time. If we were to structure the ask of the consulting firm to say, we have a bunch of things we'd like you to do, but number one, we have these two items here that could drive revenue immediately. Could you help us with the correct numbers? And then we would be in a position. So I think the 120/60 is fine from a budgeting standpoint. And then in February or March, we can fine tune what the actual numbers are that we would communicate to the businesses. Does that make sense?
Potentially. Yeah, so right now we're just trying to pick numbers for budget purposes and the start of the year. And right now, the last version I had was 16,120 and Councillor Predko.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Just to continue on that conversation, I think there is some expediency required to set a number in for 2024 because I think our annual boat slip invoice comes in January. So if we're not relaying this information to marinas until later in the spring and they've already invoiced their customers for the year, they're not going to be very happy with us if they're getting part of their fees eaten back by us. So,
so pass the budget next week is what you're saying.
Yeah.
With a reasonable number. I'm just saying that, you know, as a good overseer for these marinas, I think we owe it to them to at least try to give them an indication of what's going to happen with these numbers early in the year so they can do their invoicing.
Okay. Any other comments? What do you need? Do you need anything further from us on that?
No, if council is accepting of 60 for trailers and 120 for seasonal slips, we can put those numbers in the budget.
Yeah.
To bridge on what Councillor Predko said, though, if we need to get numbers into the marine operators and trailer park operators, then I think I would be happy leveraging what Councillor Bocek provided as a reference number and just plug those in. And then if we have better news for the marine operators, we can always reduce it later, but it's tough to drive it up later.
I personally think we have to be a little bit careful here because we're already going to get people complaining. And then once we have the defense, we might, that 60 may become 100, may become 200, we don't know next year. But I do think we'd have to be a little bit, personally, I think we have to be a little bit careful how high we're, with the yachts, we're going from 0 to 120. That's a fair change without any backup other than Councillor Bocek's experience in some other jurisdiction.
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor Cooper.
I think the caution's a good one, although I plan to blame all this on Councillor Jarvis, so he can take the heat.
Okay, fair enough. All right, I think we made some progress here. Any other direction that's Ms. Boutiette you'd like from us at this moment?
May we come back to the fee for commercial use of launches and landings? So that would be a commercial sticker of some sort that wouldn't be very tough administratively and would also help us gather insurance certificates from those commercial operators who are using our boat launches.
So we're talking roughly a dozen, we think, commercial operators. That's the figure I heard. And right now we are proposing a $500 annual fee for up to a dozen commercial operators to use our parking and launch ramp areas, as they currently are using anyway. Councillor Garazziano, followed by Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, Worship. And so I think and this could potentially be another source of revenue, we need to distinguish between the use of our launches as well as the permanent parking of a barge I have on 6 Mile Lake one barge that's permanently parked at the public launch off of Haskets, and you know, I've always wondered to myself, how is it that they do that? Actually, I think there's 2 of them, believe it or not. And so, you know, is that inclusive? Is the fee inclusive of barge parking as well, and having kind of a quasi-permanent spot of, you know, parking for their barge, or is it going to be separate of that? And it's just the fact that you're using and coming and going and tearing up the launch and well, for those unpaved ones. And then second to that, are you paying an additional fee if you want a barge there and have a kind of spot identified or dedicated to you? So just my thoughts.
It's one of those things that you'd love to scale, come up with a measuring stick. Councillor Bochek.
Yeah, thank you. And similarly, I would like to see something structured where if you said there's 12 businesses,
Well, that's
basically.
an estimate we heard.
So
Yes.
that, you know, at $500 annually for those 12 businesses that have a registered address in the township of Georgian Bay, I don't see any reason why we could, if there's a contractor coming up from Toronto to build a cottage up here, I don't see any reason why they're not paying at least double that.
Mhm.
Right? Because your business owner within this township is already paying taxes, right? So let's give them a deal, $500 to get to use launch ramp. But if you're a contractor from outside of this township, you're going to pay the price. And I think our local contractors would really appreciate that too.
Okay. Councillor Cooper.
Just curious, Councillor Graziano, what kind of barge are you talking about? Are you construction barge?
That is correct. I think there are 30, 40 footers that are sitting there. There's 2 of them on 6 Mile.
Okay, that are owned by a construction company.
That would be correct.
Okay, so they should pay for the space that they're taking up.
Yeah, and perhaps further to Councillor Graziano's example, it should be per, I'll call it units as opposed to per contractor. In other words, if one contractor has a modest barge and the trailers back and forth, that's a different story than somebody else who has 3 large barges, and I'm going from one extreme to another, permanently parked at our public areas. I think it'll be difficult, but I think ultimately this thing should be scalable.
I think so. Yeah.
And I do think Councillor Bochek's point about out-of-towners versus local is very important. Councillor Alciano.
Yeah, and just to support Councillor Bochek's comments, I think that would drive more interest in hiring local than it would you know, importing labor, given the fact that it would essentially be an indirect tax to the homeowner that's hiring someone from out of town and paying that much more on their line item versus hiring a local who has a better or a more beneficial rate to them. So it'll stimulate our microeconomy.
Anything else, Ms. Boutier? CEO Mariotti. Well, then why don't we go on to Councillor Hazelton's item about participatory and effective working relationships. Oh, sorry.
It was my item.
I'm getting so confused here.
It was Councillor Hazelton's original motion that council passed. So I'm trying to close out the resolution.
See, when you get a verbal report, I don't even know who's doing the verbalization. Sorry.
No, it's all good, and I'm just bringing this topic up because you know, I'd like to be able, like I said, close the resolution out, as it's quite broad in scope, as council's probably read the resolution, and I'm thinking that, you know, with the first anniversary of this council being here, I do feel that communication between staff and council is growing and greatly improving. And especially now that we've got a good planning department that we've got now in place. You know, since the resolution was passed back in May, several changes have occurred, which I think satisfies the request of the resolution. You know, I'm thinking of things like the implementation of various working groups as well as committees such as the Planning Advisory Committee that's been brought back online. Again, thanks to a good planning team. That's bridging the gap. And really, which is most of what the resolution relates to, is that planning relationship. So as council knows, I have an open door policy between council and the SMT, and I certainly don't believe in channeling all communication back and forth through me. And I encourage all of council to pop in, say hi, and chat about anything and everything with senior management. And that, helps to develop a good working relationship. And I know that some on council have held various meetings with my team. So really, there shouldn't be any barriers in having wholesome discussions. The one suggestion that I do have possibly could be to release the council information package every 2 weeks as opposed to once per month. And, that would give council a bit more of an up-to-date information when the township receives communications from other municipalities or other agencies or other bodies. And we could post that package and make it available on our website somewhere, for ease of access, so council can see the communication that it comes in every couple of weeks instead of every month. So I had a couple of councillors that did provide some feedback on improving communication, but I think that at this point we're going, we're certainly in a much better place, and I'm just trying to strike that item off the spreadsheet.
And see, I'm going to apologize to you again because I'm just looking at the note and moved by Councillor Hazel. But then you're right, it was May. I totally went right past the date. My apologies to you, Councillor Hazelton.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Greg, for bringing this back. I wanted to add a little bit of background here because I verbalized it when I brought the resolution forward, but I guess I didn't write it all in the report. But the point that I was trying to get to back then was I had attended a planning meeting, a Canada-wide planning meeting. And I was very intrigued in talking to members of these planning people from other jurisdictions and other provinces. And they had a very, very different working relationship with their council. In fact, one example was where there was a matter of significant interest to the council, the planning department would reach out and meet with that councillor that they knew was interested. They wouldn't wait for the councillor to ask for time with them. They would seek out input from the councillor because they knew it was a hot item and that councillor was attempting to represent his community. And so that's a very different kind of thing than say us as councillors reaching out to senior management teams. So if I could, I'd like to list a few items where this kind of thing might play out. So we all know that we have a consultant working on a water quality program, and this may not be staff reaching out to the councillors, but given the ask that we had at council, which was we initially asked for a working group. We ended up with a committee of the whole discussion, but it would really be beneficial to the township for the folks driving the water quality program RFP to reach out to perhaps Councillor Graziano for inland lake interests and concerns, and perhaps to me or a Bay councillor to specifically sit down and focus on issues that relate to those things. So when we talk about what this resolution attempted, that is an example of what I was hoping and expecting that we could get from it. We have a couple of planning matters that have been going on forever. One of them is undersized islands. The other is the H2 lifting of holds. And once again, the history of the township has relevance, and the history regarding undersized islands, I'm going to defer that to Councillor Cooper. The history on H2 holds and so on. I've done a bunch of research, and I think that once again, there's an opportunity. Discussion groups bring huge value rather than a formal working group like this, even within the committee of the whole. Additionally, I reported in my notes at the beginning of yesterday's meeting that I had a very good meeting with the district regarding waste, and the district offered to reach out to essentially create a working group with myself and Councillor Graziano, and sadly that hasn't happened yet. I guess there's still time before the end of the year, but again, waste and a working group and having staff reaching out and bringing councillors in, or expertise that the councillors can bring to the table. That's really what participative, that's what a participative process would be to me. And now we have the most recent example of something that I think is an ideal opportunity: revenue generating strategies. So Councillor Graziano has come forward with a resolution. I would be surprised if he didn't have some ideas as to who we might be able to work with. And so I would think that this is another perfect example of staff proactively reaching out and saying, Councillor Graziano, how can you help us find and help develop something that will bring us to a better place with respect to these revenue generating strategies? So where I'm getting to here is this was something that had come to my visibility from engaging with other municipal groups across the country as to how they found their groups to be most effective. And then in July, we had Rick O'Connor come and talk to us, and he was basically saying the same thing. Working groups, which we had thought previously we shouldn't be doing, he was very much endorsing the concept of working groups. And so I think that I do think that this is an important topic. I don't think we have achieved the intent of my resolution, but I think that we are on a path, and I think that keeping it active and keeping the focus on this may allow us to get to a better place going forward with more participatory involvement with the activities within the township.
Thank you. Councillor Bochek.
So I don't think this is really up for debate because we've already gone over this back in May, but I come from a completely different philosophy than this philosophy here that's brought forward. And this doesn't mean that it's a bad philosophy, but I come from a sports world. And in the sports world, this doesn't happen. You have management, you have front office, you have staff, and you have players. And I'll tell you, the players never get involved with the coaches. The coaches never get involved with the front office. You all have specific jobs to do. And when you're structuring plans, policies, procedures, and everything else, and then you're the one that's voting on them to make them law, I have an issue with that. Okay, because we are, as councillors, the ones that make the decisions of whether something is right or wrong, or we're going to bring it on board. I don't think the bias of an individual councillor in bringing that report to council should be a part of the overall picture. And I'll use one example, for instance. If you have a couple on a working committee that are very biased towards not removing H's, I'm using this as an example, and they work through that working group and convince the working group of that, and then it comes to council. And that same person that biased that decision in the working group is also making the decision on whether or not that's going to become a bylaw. So that's where I have a problem, especially the last line in this resolution. But this is my perspective, and I want everybody to understand that my perspective isn't always the right perspective, but I see it as tried and true, and I don't like the fact that councillors are going to be a part in working with staff and then making a decision on whether it's right or wrong. I have an issue with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
You're muted, sir.
You still can't read my lips. Oh, anyway, now that you can see me and hear me at the same time, look, interesting points of view, very different. I think that the analogy of the sports world is one that's once again interesting, but it's sort of a command and control environment. It's not the environment of a collaborative team, so to speak, when it comes to actually making decisions or working on solutions and so forth. So while that may work well in that world, in the corporate world, you're sunk today if you operate in any other fashion other than being very collaborative between all players, whether it's your customer side or your non-customer side, your employees, etc. You've got to be very collaborative with all players involved, all the people of the team working together. And I think what Councillor Hazelton is trying to say here is that we should try to be more collaborative. I hope that's what he's trying to say, between our council and our staff. And it shouldn't be top down. It shouldn't be either way, top down from council or from staff. And a lot more consultation would be, I think, very effective and useful, as opposed to saying, well, we have to bring you a report and we'll listen to what you have to say about our report. I would suggest that we should be developing reports together. That would be a collaborative approach to modern day management. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, Worship. I would concur with statements made by CAO Mariotti in that, as a relatively new councillor, I think that we've made substantial strides in communication. But I want to remind council that, and everyone here in this room today, that, it's not just SMT that needs to break down the barriers with us. Rather, it's a collective action that we all have to do, and nurture relationships collectively with each other to try to help those alleviate and break down some of those barriers. And so I would agree. I think that, based on my initial assessment when I first entered into this role and where we are one whole year later, I think that that we are very much have moved forward. With that said, is there more work to be done? Absolutely. As Councillor Hazelton, as Councillor Cooper had mentioned, we can collaborate and try to find ways to collaborate a little closer, and perhaps we can also take a moment to remind each other at times, if in the event that someone such as the gentleman who's doing our RFP, if he has failed to reach out to us, we can always remind staff that, hey, we're always here in the event that he has additional questions. So I think, just to kind of conclude the year, where I would have rated us maybe in a letter grade, a C- at the onset of this year, I'd say we're now hovering at a B plus. I think we can absolutely get to an A, and I think I personally am looking very forward to 2024 and working on developing those relationships and those synergies as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Jarb.
Yeah, I'll echo those comments. Having spent a little bit of time more recently with the planning department, and whether they like me or not as a result of that, I'm not too sure, but it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is they are able to sit down with me and talk through things. The CEO has been great, and just seeing the atmosphere in the office itself, generally speaking, bodes well for things ongoing. I just don't think we need to dictate from council how staff is going to be interacting with us and with everybody else. I think they know how to do it, and have been implementing that as we go along. And I'm very, very happy with the way things are going.
Thank you, Councillor Predko.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, just read the comments I wanted to make was likening the evolution of this council and SMT and the township to the 5 dysfunctions of a team. I don't know who else has read the book and gone through workshops with it, but I think, as we become a better working group, I think we naturally are getting more comfortable with our communication styles. and knowing how to deal with each other. And I think, getting that base level of trust across the board has grown immensely through the year that I've been here. And I think it's also reflected in the amount of conflict where, as we are more comfortable talking and challenging, there may be more conflict in the room, but that's a byproduct of feeling confident that you can speak your mind on an issue. So I do think we're making strides really in terms of where we had been potentially 9 months ago or even 6 months ago in May. So I'm happy to see which direction this continues to go in 2024.
Thank you. I agree. I think this council is definitely, and staff, both sides are definitely in a better spot now than we were a year ago, or certainly 9 months ago. I think that we've all grown, we've all learned, and we've all are. Well, maybe we haven't all grown up, but we're still growing, and I think we're in a much better shape. I think what's important, because I heard this a little bit in some of the comments too, is we have to recognize as individuals, individual councillors, that we come with certain opinions, certain passions, certain beliefs that aren't necessarily held by others in the community, which is a good thing because we're here and we represent each other, represent our groups, our opinions, and thank goodness there's a variety of opinions at this table. The idea of working groups that was introduced to us in July by Mr. O'Connor, I think is actually one vehicle that can be very useful because the working groups are outside the conflict of interest that is one of the conditions of council committees, that we're not supposed to have a conflict of interest on a council committee, but a working group. I mean, I remember he used the example of, and I think it was baseball fields, and he got 3 baseball field contractors in to discuss what would be good in a new bylaw. Well, obviously they were biased, but he had the 3 of them, and they took an input. And I think that, I mean, to me, and this is part of what I'm hearing, what Councillor Hazelton said, is, encouraging staff to reach out to us being not just council, but us being residents. And I would encourage staff to try to make sure that when they reach out, that they actually get a variety of opinions and viewpoints. And I think that's very important because we don't want to be, we don't want them to hear just one opinion, even if it's spoken by 3 voices. We want them to hear a range of opinions so that they can make a well-informed recommendation to us. We may or may not accept the recommendation. We may think that they missed somebody they should have talked to. Don't know. But to me, I just want to say that, yes, I think that we've made strides in this. I think also what's very important is, and planning is the easiest example because we now have we had 5 planners sitting here this morning. Most of them weren't here a year ago. So we have made real strides that way. And my experience with the planners, even though with the most recent Andrew, it's been very limited, is that they want to hear. They want to hear what we know, what our experiences are, our perspectives. And I think that's all very positive. And I think we have to, keep that growth going in 2024 of the communication and making sure that our staff are as well informed as possible as they make their recommendations. But each one of us individually has to recognize that our opinion is only our opinion. It's not necessarily the opinion of the rest of council or the rest of the township. In our opinion, I know I'm told numerous times that opinions can't be right or wrong. Well, it could be that our opinion is wrong for the particular application, but it's still additional information that we're giving staff. And I think that part is very important. And I think, and thank you, Councillor Graziano, for getting us out of the low C's to the mid to high B's. because I think it's actually true. I don't think I don't think we're A plus, but I think our grade has definitely improved well in the last 12 months. And I want to thank everybody on both sides of this table and our residents for that. Councillor Bochek.
I like your summary of that. I think it's well put, and I think there can be an effective relationship between council and staff. But like you said, in the format of a working group, what I've been opposed to all along is individual councillors going into individual departments and whatever it is they're spreading it. And
Including you, of course.
including everybody. And I don't like that. I do like the format of a working group where councillors and professionals within the community can give relevant information to a working group. But the one-on-one walking into staff, I'm not real fond of. So your comments at the very end are very well taken. Thank you.
And you have to exit. Okay, well, thank you very much for being here today. And you'll miss the second round of comments, but we're going to probably end this relatively soon. So thank you. Yeah. Boy, we like to keep you alive. Councillor Cooper, please.
No microphone.
The lip reading skills are being exercised.
It's a disease that's catching for sure. I just wanted to say that a lot of really good comments, and I think we should certainly take some credit for moving it along somewhat. I think before we start patting ourselves too much on the back, we still have quite a distance to go. I think more collaboration between our staff, ourselves, more listening to our constituents is very important. They are our customer, and at least that's the way I view the world. I will say one thing: I rarely wander into people's offices and try and bend their ear and get my way. That's not how I operate. I operate front and center right here. And there are people in our township that are doing a lot of behind the scenes lobbying, and it's unfortunate to see. Let's hopefully we can get that out of our system pretty soon. But thank you everybody for your efforts.
Thank you. Well, I think we've discussed that topic. Still room to grow, but the good news is I think all agree we've made progress.
I guess we'll end up with a perennially open-ended resolution then.
But communication is always something that can be improved, I would argue. Yeah. That means it's time to call this meeting to an end. We can all shed a tear. Yeah. Well, we're meeting again next week in the budget format. Okay, before Councillor Hazelton starts singing too much, I have moved by Councillor Alan Singer Hazelton, seconded by, well, I can't say Brian Bochek anymore, so I'm going to say Predco. Be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole does now adjourn at 3:38 p.m. to reconvene on February 13th, 2024, or at the call of the chair. All